Assalamu alaikum. So today we'll do with a question regarding Imam Ghazali and his book Ihya, and one of the serious allegations that's made against him, which is that he fabricates hadiths in Ihya or includes weak hadiths. So two of them are two different things, but he's actually condemned for both by a specific sect of people within Islam, and this is something that has been it's been going on for a while. That Ghazali is not followable. He should not be followed. He should not be he should not be idolized the way that he is in the current world, which obviously, I mean, of course, you can make a case for yourself that you don't want to follow Ghazali for his teachings because he has this certain method or certain opinions that probably would not satisfy your method of approaching Islam. So that's something acceptable, right? But at the same time, there are some people who would just outright say that his works are blasphemous. They would say, to the extent that probably he's just an apostate, which is ridiculous. So that is why I just decided to, since I've read Ihya and I've been reading Ghazali for a while, so I just thought I was gonna, come forward and address these issues from within my knowledge, my scope of knowledge. Now, the very first thing that I want to point out here, so I'm starting to address the questions now. The very first thing that I think should be made clear is that it's actually, so Ghazali is a human, and you have to be accepting of human flaws and human limitations. That's very much a part of being a human, and it's not really exclusive to Ihya or any of Ghazali's books. It's just a principle in general where you just, because they're not prophets, the authors of these books of knowledge or books of ilm that we pick up and read, they're not really prophets, they're humans, right? So we should be able to accept the human flaws whenever we're picking up a book and reading through it and trying to criticize or critique the author. Human flaws are always going to be there. So that's that. You have to be able to establish the fact that it's not a prophet revealing to you anything. It's just a person, a man, and his knowledge and sometimes his opinions as well. Has just compiled all of them for your benefit, and you just have to be able to differentiate. We have to take help from a scholar or somebody senior to you to just differentiate between the right and the wrong. Whenever you're navigating a path of ilm, and it's just pretty much the basic way to actually deal with ilm in the first place. So that's that. That's the first thing that I wanted to get out of the way, because it's just the very thing that Imam Ghazali can make mistakes, and it's very much, and it's this particular allegations. It's this much highlighted because it's Ghazali and it's Ihya. And it's very common. It's very, it's very standard for anybody of any author to make mistakes when writing a book, because as I said, it's none of it is prophetic. It's just the collection of knowledge and understanding and sometimes opinions. So anybody can make mistakes, including Ghazali, which he did. Ghazali actually had some errors going into Ihya or in many of his other books, and this allegation is actually real, because Ghazali had those fabricated hadiths, some of those fabricated hadiths. So among this huge pool of hadiths, he had those couple of or a few fabricated hadiths as well as weak hadiths in Ihya, and that's what really made the people criticizing him tick, and they just come up, and it's precisely because it's Ghazali and Ihya that these people against Ghazali would just come up and bring it up every time, dump on you this collection of, the fabricated hadith, saying that he was wrong in this and that, which is again, it's not a very healthy practice when you're engaging a scholar of this stature like Ghazali. So it speaks more for Ghazali's stature than his haters or these people who criticize him, actually, because just because it's Ghazali, they're gonna bring it up over and over again. So let's just start with weak hadiths, the allegation of weak hadiths, which is again very common in many books. You would find these weak hadiths coming up, and there is a specific way to deal with weak hadiths from the study of hadith, what we know as rijal. And there are three ways, whenever we talk about weak hadiths and whether to act upon them, whether to cancel them out, we actually talk three specific ways to deal about it. I mean, three specific ways are actually established from the practices of the great scholars. So one of them is we can outright reject the weak hadiths. The second practice would be if the weak hadith is on a specific subject that no other hadith has actually touched upon. In that case, that weak hadith would be accepted as a hadith of guidance, so to speak. And then there is a third way to go about it, is when you do not really, if the hadith is not talking about a specific act of worship or fiqh, it's not touching upon a specific section of the fiqh. In that case, you can just take that hadith as a moral code. It's kind of more of a, you can just take the essence of the hadith rather than the text of the hadith, right? The matan of the hadith. You can just take the moral teaching of the hadith and you just apply it to your understanding. And this is the way to go about it, actually, this third way to go about it. I think it was Imam Sakhawi who actually classified this way, and he said that number 3 is the way to go. And even Maulana Abdul Hayy Lakhnawi rahimahullah, he actually said the third way is the way to go for the Muslims within the bounds of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So of course, obviously, so there is a way to reconcile the weak hadiths and their teachings. So whenever you come across a weak hadith, you do not really outright reject it. You just paying respect to our rich tradition of hadith sciences, the chain of transmission, the tradition of this hadith narration. You just take the weak hadith, you just try to put it in comparison with any other authentic hadith and try to take the teaching. So the teaching of the weak hadith, it actually overlaps with the teaching from the authentic hadith or even the Quran. You can actually take that particular hadith, right? So that actually solves the issue. There's a very fair solution to how you could just go about Ihya and any Ghazali's work. And if you come across a weak hadith, all you have to do is just be honest to yourself. And there's one more way to go about it, is basically the taqrij, the taqrij of Ihya. You can just go through the taqrij of Ihya. The taqrij basically means validation of the hadiths. So all you have to do is just pick up a taqrij rather than the original manuscript of Ihya. So you do not need the original if you fear that there are this hadiths that you don't want to see, like the weak hadiths or the fabricated hadiths. All you can do is just pick up the taqrij of Ihya, and there are good taqrij, I think, available everywhere right now. So I know that Bangladesh has one from Darul Takbir. You can just pick those books from the store and you can go through, and every one of the hadiths that's mentioned there, it has a taqrij attached to it, a footnote, whether it's Sahih, whether it's Hasan, or whether it's weak or even fabricated. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why Ghazali is so misunderstood, is because the people teaching Ghazali, people teaching Ihya, sometimes there is, I know of a Sufi extreme sect that what they would do is basically start worshipping Ghazali, and they would not really listen to other interpretations or other criticisms, which is really unhealthy, because at this point you are basically worshipping Ghazali. You're not really preaching Ghazali, the real Ghazali, who was not really like that. Who would be, and it's in Qaran al-Tawil, which is another book of Ghazali. Ghazali says it himself. It's more of a confessional quote from Ghazali, where he says, my knowledge in hadith is insufficient. So he had this humility. He was humble enough to come forward and say himself that he did not have access to, very good access to the hadiths. So he was very upfront about it. But if you're not upfront about it, some Sufi extremes, what they would do would just try to just teach the original manuscript, saying the Takhrij ones, those are deviations or modifications or something. The Takhrij is not a modification. It's a modification, but it's not really a deviation. It's just you could call it a refining of Ihya. So I would suggest that if you fear that the hadith collection is not really satisfactory in Ihya, you just pick up a Takhrij of the Ihya, and that would just solve half the problem that you have, because that Takhrij would not have any fabricated hadith in the first place, and then it would not also have, even if it has those weak hadiths in them, it would have those comments or footnotes attached to them, which would tell you if a hadith is weak or sahih, and that way you can be safe navigating through the entire teachings of Ihya, and take the cream of it. So that's a good solution, I believe. And now I'm coming to the fabricated hadiths now. Now every single commentary of Ihya. So the commentary so there are a lot of commentaries now. For example, I think one of the finest, it was Ibn al-Iraqi or something, is Ibn al-Iraqi. So he was Zain al-Iraqi, I'm sorry. So Zain al-Iraqi was someone who did this entire commentary on Ihya, and he was very thorough with it. He actually did the Takhrij, validated the hadiths, and then said that it's just a few of them are fabricated. And every single commentary that you go through, every single Takhrij, a compilation of Ihya you go through, they would tell you the same thing, that Ghazali had this kind of, he did not have much access to hadiths. So you would find this, and so there was like, they would just put a caution or a foreword before, at the start of the book, and they would just warn you beforehand. And that's pretty much it, it's pretty straightforward. It's a good standard practice to let the readers know what they should expect. So that's that, you could just pick up Takhrij, and if you think, and every single commentator that speaks about Ihya, they did the Ihya, they did the entire commentary, they did the Takhrij, without having any objection to Ghazali's principle of work, because they do not believe that Ghazali actually, fabricated the hadiths, which doesn't make any sense, which is absolutely ridiculous, because he would not be able to fabricate it. He would not really fabricate the hadiths. The fabricated hadiths that you see in Ihya, they actually existed way before Ihya was written or Ghazali was born even. The fabricated hadiths have been existing among us from the times of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhu, right? From the times that there were false narrators and they would be punished. The Sahabas were utmost in trying to preserve the authenticity of the sayings of Prophet, peace be upon him. So it doesn't make any sense for Ghazali to be coming forward and fabricating the hadiths themselves. The fabricated hadiths were always there. It's about the collection of the hadiths. When Ghazali was collecting these hadiths, he was actually collecting from different sources. He was picking up different sources of hadiths, and he was just compiling them based on the patterns that he was seeing whenever he was trying to make a point. So if he was trying to make a point about fiqh, of a particular fiqh, or any other, lesson that Ihya is all about, he would just go around and he would just pick up those pieces from different places and they're just put together. So it was not really something that Ghazali was doing intentionally. That's something that the people use to portray Ghazali as this blasphemous, this apostate figure, which is absolutely ridiculous, absolutely terrible to, call somebody blasphemous just because he had a lapse in judgment of the hadiths that he was compiling. Again, it just takes us back to that argument about human flaws. So he had human flaws, and he was really very much humble about it. He accepted his own flaws. Why can't we? Also, there was because it's Sheikh Abdul Fattah al-Ghudda rahimahullah, and he actually talked about it a little bit when he said the reason for this fabricated hadiths fluxing into Ihya is because Ghazali was mainly citing a book called Qutul Qulub by Abu Talib Makki, and that book is not it's not a great source of hadiths, right? It had those fabricated hadiths in them. So Ghazali was just picking up those. If you read through Ihya, you'll see this Qutul Qulub, this particular reference coming up way too often. And Qutul Qulub, as I said, is not a great source. So there were good sources of hadiths that Ghazali was picking up from, and there were bad sources like that one. Even though if you just look at a good takhrij of Ihya, you will still see the Qutul Qulub there, because Qutul Qulub had a mix of this Sahih, Hasan, and weak, and also the fabricated hadiths. So those hadiths that are authentic, they're still in the takhrij. Those that are fabricated, that have been put away. So Ghazali was not intentionally he was definitely not fabricating the hadiths. He was definitely also not picking those fabricated hadiths and putting them in his book. He was just compiling. He was merely compiling the book, compiling the hadiths to make a point. And obviously he was not, and you cannot really show me an example from Ihya where he was deriving a ruling of fiqh based on a single hadith. That's not possible. He was taking from the Quranic verses. There was a large collection of Quranic verses for every chapter, for every single teaching, every single fiqh. He was picking the Quranic verses first, and then the hadiths. As I said, some of the hadiths might have been weak, some of them might have been fabricated, but he was not really basing anything on a single hadith. So there is no way the Ghazali would be basing a ruling or a conduct, deriving a ruling of a conduct based on a single fabricated hadith. So that's not possible. So saying that Ihya is full of these fabrications, full of this misguidance would be just foolish. It's not really how Islamic scholarship works. He just picked those hadiths, and he would also pick quotes from the great scholars like Hasan al-Basri, Imam al-Shafi rahimahullah, Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah. So he would just pick all those quotes first off the Quran, then the hadiths, and then the quotes to make his point. It was not about a single hadith, so there is no ruling there that is coming from a single isolated hadith, right? So that doesn't make any sense either. So Ghazali was pretty much in his own element. Of course, he had his own usul, and you can question about his different steps of the usul. Maybe he, as I said, he was not a very good hadith compiler for his book, and that might have led to the whole issue of him being questioned this often. But again, you have to understand that he was not As I said, he had so he had great teachers. His teachers are also well known that go back to the chain, go back through the chain. You can go back to Imam Ghazali and his Risala, which also had similar issues, but at the same time, you need to understand that they were both humans. They were not really trying to, mislead anybody. I know it's not really true. It's really dishonest of anyone to say that they were blasphemous, and being blasphemous intentionally, which is not really true. They just had this. So Ghazali had this mastery over different stuff. So he had mastery over jurisprudence, obviously, the Shafi'i fiqh. He had mastery over the philosophy at the time. He had mastery over all the other branches. I would say that he had mastery. People might say no, but it's as far as I've read him, I've found him very much at home with all his different sciences, except for the Hadith sciences, and that's something that he's also pretty confessional about. So to say that he was outside his element when he was doing stuff, it's pretty dishonest. So at this point in time, I would just like to conclude it here. I just could, just go point by point, argument by argument, rebutting everything, but that would be just a waste of time. I just thought that it's, in general, you could just think about it, this in general, and go about it. Thank you very much. Maybe someday we're going to meet again with a different proposition.